Welcome in to the Bro 4 Squad podcast, where we are just a bunch of bros drinking beer and talking movies. This is our review of A Quiet Place, Part 2. I am your host, the Mayor, Jeff Hornacek. Thank you so much for checking us out. I am joined by our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, here to review this movie as we do every movie on the Bro 4 Squad podcast, using our 5 criteria, which is the acting, the story, our favorite scene, the impact of the film, and then its rewatchability. Ronnie, we will not do this review in sign language like we had planned. Let's do it. Let's talk.
Well, damn. I practiced all week.
I know. It's an auditory podcast, so I started thinking last night, I was like, that won't be good listening for people.
I thought we were going to be innovative, okay?
That's not our thing. Let's dive right in with the acting and cast for A Quiet Place Part 2. The returning Lee family, and then we got some new folks from the town of, Millbrook-ish? Or Millbrook adjacent. What would you think?
I think when you have a movie like this that takes away a lot of the traditional strengths that actors require, it brings a different element. And I think everyone from the top bill to the bottom were fantastic again. It's always harder when you have a sequel, but I think this is personal to like Emily Blunt and the people involved. And so you saw the same passion in it. I thought, again, the children, especially in horror, were amazing. I thought Millicent Simmons was fantastic. I thought she was one of my favorites in the first film. She was one of my favorites again in this film because she is deaf in real life. And to her, this is an amazing opportunity to kind of showcase her talents and real, fears you might be having if you were in her situation. And Noah Jupe, I know you talked about him a little off pod. I just really feel like this requires higher level of acting than you would be normally used to. And if it's not delivered well, it will ruin the movie. And everyone knocked it out of the park, honestly.
Yeah, all of the Abbotts are just such standouts. Even the baby.
The baby was, honestly, if he doesn't get an Oscar nod, then
I
what are we
heard the
doing?
baby was a total diva on set, though.
Needed like 2 bottles of milk a day. Like, what the fuck?
And they had to be like a perfect temperature, otherwise he wouldn't read his lines or cry.
Naps too, dude.
We've all worked with someone like that. No, but yeah, Noah Jupe and Millicent Simmons are the standouts here. And as far as the Abbott family goes, obviously Lee Abbott, played by John Krasinski, who we see him in the flashback sequence early on, but he's not in most of the film, so the burden for them to carry is a little bit heavier. Because even though Cillian Murphy's character Emmett sort of fills that void, I think we see Reagan and Marcus's characters like forced to sort of elevate their responsibility in the world now that they've left the farm. And Noah Jupe, just like you said, a lot of this has to be nonverbal, or you have to find ways to convey different types of emotions without just being able to talk. So it's kind of a George Lucas screenwriting nightmare. He's like, well, if they can't say how they're feeling, how does the audience know?
You have to use your body? What? No.
But even just thinking about Noah Jupe, like the scene early on where Marcus gets the bear trap caught on his leg.
Mm-hmm.
That was incredible. And the dude is like basically just having to act like he's dying while his mom tries to keep him from making much noise.
That's honestly, at that point, I'm just going to yell and be like, no, I'm done. This is more of a burden to survive now.
Movies always do that. They're like, it's fine, we'll make it work. It's like, but really? Will we?
No. Can I say, I always say, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name, Djimon Hounsou.
Yeah.
I feel like we haven't seen him in a long time. He was all over the place in the 2000s. Like, I loved him. Obviously, Gladiator was one of his biggest, but he was in so much stuff back then. Honestly, maybe I've just been missing it. When he came on the screen, I was like, oh my God.
I love him. The only thing I can remember seeing him in recently is Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain Marvel,
right.
But very small role.
But he was very much in the 2000s, like having big roles in a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to see him. And once I heard originally, like several years ago, that Cillian Murphy was announced for the sequel, you put him in anything, and I'm like, I'm always intrigued by his performances. I felt like this was a very Cillian Murphy role. Like, right? Like, it's just like every role he's in is kind of like, yeah, that's why they cast him in this. And have you seen True Detective season 3?
Parts of it, yes.
Okay, so Scoot McNairy, who's in a ton of stuff, actually plays the Marina Man, like the guy on the dock. I'm going to share my screen with you real quick. This is bad podcasting, but so you can see his face. It's this dude.
Oh, yeah.
So he had a ton of makeup on, and I don't even think he says a line. But when I saw his name in the cast, I was like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I would have never put that together.
Yeah. So overall, great performances again. And the thing I think we all love about these movies is they ask something unique from the actors, and they have delivered 2 straight times. All right, on to the story and plot. So IMDb's plot synopsis of A Quiet Place Part 2 says, let me pull it up. Following the events at home, the Abbott family now face the terrors of the outside world. Forced to venture into the unknown, they realize the creatures that hunt by sound are not the only threats lurking beyond the sand path. And I have to say, I actually don't think that's a great synopsis of this movie.
No, that actually does not sound great
I think
at
it
all.
emphasizes the human element, which is a really minor threat in this film. Like, it's talked about more than it's seen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, we got one scene with these feral humans, right? Like, that was not a problematic issue overall. So that's an interesting description.
Yeah, but we talked about this off pod. The challenge anytime you make a sequel to something as conceptually unique as A Quiet Place is, how do you keep the story interesting, fresh, and new without over expanding the world to the point where like the novelty and the intimacy of that first film wears off on you? And I do think they effectively did that here. It's still very minimalist. I felt like it wasn't like the end of the world. It wasn't like Independence Day with the aliens. But we still got a little bit more answers to the questions we had, but not so much to where we're not losing interest in the concept.
And obviously we saw in the trailer, John Krasinski was going to be in the film. We saw obviously that was how it was set up. I actually was surprised in a good way that I was thinking there would be a lot of flashbacks in the movie. We only got the one at the very beginning, and I think that was perfect. It was the less is more type situation. They could have buried themselves where John wanted to be in as much of the movie as he wanted to be, and so now they're backtracking and trying to create other storylines, expanded the universe in that sense, and they didn't. They just really kind of gave us a nice little show at the very beginning, and so I'm glad they did that too. Now, my one thing with the story, and maybe this is just me, maybe I had too many cocktails while I was watching it, I didn't understand the human feral, what was that motivation? I think the movie would have been fine without it. Like, they could have done the exact same thing and it wouldn't have removed an element. I think that's where I was just like, I don't really understand why these, like, what are they getting out of this? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about them, and questions not in the sense that like I'm intrigued by it. Questions like I'm saying it, they just seem very superfluous to the plot.
I just didn't need it. Yeah. You could have done the exact same thing and canceled that scene out and just gotten them on the boat.
It's interesting that they even exist like that, because it's like it's not like a zombie post-apocalyptic world where it's like, okay, you guys can form your own, like, they're not going to be able to live being so.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand. What's going on? Like, did the aliens hire them? I'm like, what?
And then the aliens show up and just rip them to threads. It's really, really weird. I guess if anything, and maybe I'm just trying to stretch here for a narrative reason to include them, it shows how much humanity has basically devolved in like a year and a half. But still, I think there's better ways to. We get it when we see the train ripped open and there's decomposing corpses on it.
Yeah, and Cillian Murphy also served as that, right? Like, they purposely showed him as a friend, and they show him later as this human who has just lost all hope and care. When they're talking about they had lit the fire, why didn't you come help? That kind of thing. Like, he didn't care. The humans had already devolved in that sense. So I don't know. It was fine. Don't get me wrong. It didn't ruin the movie for me. It was the only thing in the movie that I just felt like seemed unnecessary. Don't think it added much to it.
Yeah. Luckily, it was not, even though the plot synopsis, like we said, is a little bit deceiving. Luckily, it was not a huge point of, like, it was really just like that one scene. It was mentioned a few times, but.
And I wonder if it was, sorry.
No, I was going to say one thing story-wise you actually reminded me of when you talked about Cillian Murphy's character Emmett and sort of how he's lost hope in humanity. It's an interesting choice where, when I think back to the scene where the Abbotts are like approaching his steel mill where he's at, and he's looking at them through the scope, holding his finger on the trigger. I'm assuming he recognizes them, and his decision making in killing them is like, I know these people, and yes, I was friends with them, but if they come here, it's only going to create problems.
Yes, absolutely.
And
he was like, I want you gone.
Yeah, and I don't think he was saying that to like protect them. He was just like, this isn't. I don't really know what sort of life he's trying to preserve. I don't even think he does, but he's saying it's going to be a lot harder with a baby, 2 kids, and you here.
First of all, I didn't sign up for this.
Another thing,
can you do a DNA test? That's not my baby. Maury
I'm not
comes
claiming
in.
it's yours. Maury's still alive. Even the monsters like his show so much, they're like, let's keep him.
That's the one guy we all are in agreement with.
Another thing about that opening scene, and we might get to this next with best scene, but I think it really serves two purposes. Number one, obviously, I think the big question we had, or what we were curious about from the first film, is like, how did this all start? And there's still a lot out there that is unanswered in a very intriguing way. But seeing day one is really cool from that perspective. But also, it does a good job of establishing Cillian Murphy's character as being someone who the Abbotts knew. If he would have just shown up later, I mean, it would have been easy to explain away. But it was kind of cool to see like their relationship prior to this, and then it sort of helps you buy into, like, he's sitting there with his kid at the baseball game.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a trope at this point, or maybe I've just, it's coincidental and I built it up to be, but is there not a more cinematic sport being played when aliens enter the atmosphere than baseball? It's
That's
always
true.
baseball.
Yeah, it's never
Men in Black, Independence Day, it's just like there's baseball game happening and they're like, what?
That kid got lucky though. What's Noah Jupe's character? Marcus, because he was down 1-2 in the count and he was about to strike out.
And he wasn't looking good.
No, he was
There
not.
was zero confidence at the plate.
That pitcher, he could have thrown whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
Way to fucking bail him out, aliens. He sees the aliens like, oh, thank God.
I've been dreaming about this day.
Yeah, I do not want to face this guy. That'll go down as just a non at bat, right?
That was me like in finals in college. I'm like, God, if aliens invaded right now, I wouldn't have to do anything. That'd be awesome.
Really sick. Also, it's interesting the calm before the storm in that scene. Like, something's happening, and he goes into.
I always love that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you ready to move on to best scene?
Yeah,
because I have a
absolutely. Yeah, because I was going to talk more about it. That's why I was like, well, we'll get more into that one. I mean, yeah, I think off pod, I was thinking about what my best scenes were. It's always a strong opening, right? If you open like this, you set the intensity for the rest of the movie, right? You're locked in on your seat immediately, and it's always tough to do, especially with a horror movie. So I got to give my best scene, I think, at the end of the day, to the opening scene. Just the background, what we were talking about. I think this is where the movie really took a risk there, because they could have done too much in terms of the backstory. Mm-hmm. We always want the prequel, right? We always want the setup story, and a lot of times that's sometimes disappointing. You're like, well, that kind of ruined it now for me. They minimized the background story. I think that was perfect. We only got the one scene with John Krasinski, but it gave us exactly what we wanted to see, exactly how this came about, and I just really gave you that connection to it. Connected the first movie, got John in there, but honestly, at the end of the scene, I was hooked. I was ready to go.
So, slight tease: at the end of the year, we're counting down our top 100 movies of all time. And perhaps Cloverfield will make an appearance in my top 100 list. But the thing that I love about the original Cloverfield is there is no expository scene where the scientist walks in and explains, this is what we're up against. This is what we're facing. You experience everything as the characters do. Yeah. Like, when shit like this happens in movies...
what would you do?
Right. Like, you don't know... You don't know what's going on. You
don't turn on CNN while you're getting attacked. Like, who are these guys?
Exactly. We were just at a Little League game, and now, like, monsters are ravaging the streets. We don't know what's happening. And you're in that with the characters, which I think is so great. And I think one thing I was worried about was we were going to get that scene in the second iteration of this franchise, right? Like, they were going to go someplace, and either Cillian Murphy or Djimon Hounsou or someone else was going to say, this is their weakness. This is how they got here. And you're going to be like, oh, well, that's not as cool now,
I was worried about that there were going to be like military men at the island, and that they're like, this device.
Yeah.
How can we spread it around the world? Kind of thing.
Right. And I think that's why that opening scene, we always say on the pod, doesn't have to be the best scene, but it does have to set a tone for the movie. And the opening scene certainly did that here. I will say, and I think they released, it was either like a full trailer that was like a minute and a half from that scene, or it was just the majority of the trailer was from the opening sequence, because I remember how creeped out I was that scene where Emily Blunt is driving in the truck and the bus is kind of like careening down the street, and she slams it in reverse, and you're like, what is this bus doing? And you can sort of see in the background, if you're paying attention, that the creature has killed the bus driver and is like crawling out of the front of the bus. Such a creepy and eerie shot.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a driver's license, so I think that is inherently scary.
Well,
And
he
no
has a
insurance.
permit. So even though the driver is dead, the driver is over the age of 18. So
See,
he's
that's where they
allowed.
get you. Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
It's just so funny. What is the guy, the monster's like, what the hell am I doing?
the cop pulls him over. He's like, "Are you just pulling me over because I'm an alien?" No, sir. No, that has
Sir,
nothing to do with
sir,
it.
please do not insinuate that.
Yeah. Now, you did murder 11 people and run 2 red lights. I'm going to let you off with a verbal here. Um, Another honorable mention I had was, I know we just kind of said we didn't really understand their inclusion of their characters, but the scene at the docks, I actually thought you were referencing how this off pod, how this kind of built tension because there was the symmetry of what was happening at the docks versus what was happening
Emily Blunt getting the medical supplies.
right, and Marcus sort of like fending for his life back at the steel mill. And I just really appreciated Emmett and Reagan's relationship kind of coming to a head when he signals to her to dive. That was maybe my favorite like brief moment.
Yeah.
In the movie.
I thought the whole movie it was tough for me to think about what the best scene was because I think I said this off pod. It wasn't really best scenes; it was best sequences.
Yeah.
Because there was so much overlapping with each other, right? They complemented each other. What was happening to Emmett and what was happening to Emily, at the same time, and just the overall. I felt like this movie, not in a really an insulting way, had a little less storyline than the first one, but it made up for it with its intensity. It was a short movie; it was an hour and a half, right? Like it felt intense the entire time.
And I mean,
and so
we can even just reference every scene in the movie. The train sequence I thought was great too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it was tough to do because the whole movie was inherently just this overall intensity being built and growing and this feeling of impending doom again. Like where even if you survive this round, like okay, cool, you just survived for another hour, right? Like it's endless.
All right, moving on to the impact of this movie, or really any questions you had leaving this. I have a few things that might stir up something in your head, Cycly. My first one is, we talked about this before. It seems pretty obvious. This is set up very well for a third one, possibly in a trilogy. Like, I think they could culminate this story very well with one more iteration. Do you want that? Or do you think we're definitely getting one? This has actually crushed at the box office this weekend, I saw.
Well, I was going to talk about that on the impact on the box office, just the combination of where we are with the pandemic, people going back to movies. My AMC stock is going through the roof. I mean, come on, people.
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a third one, absolutely. And they did well enough in this one. You always take a risk with sequels, horror movie sequels especially. I think I do want a third one, which is tough to say sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you told me this off pod again. The fact that the family is split up almost seems like there has to be a third one, right? The Abbotts reuniting, even if I still think Emily Blunt's character is going to pass away in the third one, but they have to get back together, right? Like Reagan now has the device to weaken the monsters hooked up with the aux cord. It's eerily similar, kind of, but obviously done much differently than Mars Attacks. How the opera music is the alien's weakness.
Yeah, the yodeling.
Here's the acoustics.
Can I just say really fast? It made me think about, speaking of borrowing from things, I mean, it's the exact same monster from Stranger Things. Like, the design of the creatures is literally the Stranger Things monster. I was like, wait a second, I've seen this before.
Well, the reason I was thinking Cloverfield, too, I get, like, because of the long arms that extend out in front, I kind of get, like, a little bit of Cloverfield vibes. Obviously, much smaller.
They're all related. They all know each other.
Yeah, if you go to their family reunions, it's kind of a mess. Another thing I was thinking of, this, as a sequel goes, it actually operates fine in isolation. Like, if you were to walk into this movie not having seen the first one, the mere opening scene really gives you all the context that you need.
And I think that's what makes this more unique as a horror movie, because you don't need any setup at all. There's nothing inherently outside of just John Krasinski, what happened to him. You wouldn't know that, but you would assume he died. Also, where their other son went. That too. But you know what I mean? Like, you don't need that inherently to enjoy this movie. And I think that's where the risk of the third one is going to... You already take a risk with the horror movie sequel, and now it's even harder for the third one. The intensity is going to go even higher. The risk of expanding the world, like you talked about, is more likely. And the risk of it just kind of disappointing is higher too. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I hope they have a plan, but it's a risky part to do this, to tell a whole story over 3 movies.
Yeah, I think one more would be perfect. And then I guess if they want to do spin-offs or something, that's fine. But we can tie up the Abbott family and whatever happened in their town, I think, with just one more installment. Last thing I had, and then anything obviously you want to talk about, so the one thing we still don't know is why/how the creatures came to Earth. Like we see the explosion in the sky, and sort of what their motivation is. Is that something that you need answered in a third installment, or do you think, like you said, it's sort of better leave the mystery out there, let's speculate on Reddit about it instead?
I think that's one of the things as this audience, as the audience ask for, and then we're disappointed by when we get an answer. Like, why inherently do I care why these aliens are
Protect us from ourselves. Like, I don't need to know everything.
And of course I want to know everything. I'm sick. I want to know all of it, but it doesn't get you any satisfaction. What motivation are we going to see these aliens on the ship be like, oh, these humans are noisy, let's go kill them? Like, it doesn't really serve a purpose to me. I'm not going to say they probably will try to tell us a little bit of something. I do want to know if they crash landed here or that was just them entering our atmosphere, that like little explosion. But if they try to explain it, you're going to make some people happy and you're going to make a lot of people annoyed.
Yeah. I don't really want to see like their technology or their ship, but right now the only thing we can tell is they just mindlessly attack every single living thing that they see and kill it.
Yeah, they're angry. They need therapy.
They're pissed off, yeah. That's what happens when you bet on the NFL. That's the result.
That's actually why they showed up. They thought the Green Bay was going to go for the touchdown and instead they kicked the field goal.
Well, the problem was they scored at the end and they didn't have to kick the extra point to win. That's how they would have covered,
This makes no sense. Yeah, absolutely.
The league's rigged. Anything you had for impact?
I just think overall, it was cool to see the box office numbers in the last year and a half. We've talked about this plenty on the pod, but, this was the second movie now I've seen in theaters in the last 2 weeks, which is crazy. I just think the impact is what a perfect time for the movie to be released. What a perfect time to get people back in the theater. And I think you have a movie high build like this, that everyone really enjoys. It's short, to the point. I think it's going to get people out to the movies more so now with other movies coming out this summer. I think there's a lot of good stuff coming out, especially in the horror genre, which I'm super excited about. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, the impact is going to be, this is the reintroduction for most people into normalcy with the movies.
Yeah, my showing was, I think AMC was limiting it to 50% capacity, but I think we were there. Like, I think we were at 50%.
Yeah, same.
And I saw it in an IMAX, so it was a little bit bigger than a normal theater.
Wow. Okay, brag much?
Look, I'm made of money.
You can afford IMAX tickets over here. Okay.
I'll edit that out. I want people to think I'm humble. I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this was one of, or maybe it was either the first or the second movie that pushed last year during the pandemic. Like that moved off its release date to where we started to think like, okay, this whole summer might just be punted.
When movies started doing it, because movies are always, if you just study history in terms of economic hardships or wars, downturns, the movie industry for the last 80 years has always thrived. No matter, even if like when there's been depressions or recessions, the movie industry always has survived and thrived. I think when movies started pushing release dates last March, that hit us in a very different type of place, because that's something that you always can inherently have to rely on. It helped that we had streaming. My God, if we didn't have streaming, what would we have done completely?
We would have killed ourselves and each other.
Yeah, 80s and 90s. But I mean, it's so weird in Americans. Not really. It's a worldwide, staple now. The movies, the entertainment industry. We can talk about what movies are going to look like going forward with competing platforms and things like that. But that was a real effect of what we were about to enter into with the pandemic. And so, yeah, when this happened, you saw James Bond get pushed. You saw all these movies get pushed. You're like, okay, this is not normal. And it's just so nice to finally be here.
Yeah. Fast and Furious and Black Widow coming up, I think, followed suit right after. And once the big tentpole movies move, like you said, you kind of know it's a big paradigm shift.
They try with Tenet. Remember, they moved it like 2 months and then they moved it again. And you're just like, you're like, oh, man.
But I do think, like you said, this is sort of just reiterating the point you made earlier. This is a sign, though, that the movie industry and theater specifically, I think, are going to be back in basically full force this summer. I mean, this made $58 million its opening weekend, and it's a horror movie.
I think people for a while, obviously, were movie theaters were not doing as well, right? Because people could watch from the comfort of their own home. But now movie theaters, one, with the pandemic, people are ready to go out, so that helps. Two, most movie theaters have adapted in some sort of way to start giving you a more unique experience. Whether it's
Yes.
AMC or the other movie theaters where I live, they all have drinks, they all have food. They have service. You have more of an experience than just paying. I'm paying $10 to go sit in a seat when I can watch the same movie at home. And so I think movies right now are kind of in a perfect place to make a comeback because of people willingness to leave their house, but also get something different than just sitting and watching a movie.
Yes, twofold. And actually, that ties right into our last category, which is rewatchability, or basically our recommendation. Would you recommend people watch this film? And to exactly what you were saying, Cycly, the sound design and mixing in this movie, I'm no expert on it, but you have to see this thing in theaters. I mean, they do something in terms of, auditorily with this that is incredibly unique. Even like if you exclude the fact that I won't take your thunder, but the way that the characters communicate a lot, the sound of the creatures and the way, like in my IMAX theater, when the creature was behind the performer on screen, like that's where the audio would come from. It was insanely creepy. So I don't know. I don't think I'll personally rewatch this, just because not in theaters. I'll wait till it comes out to watch it again. Maybe we'll do a commentary. But I would highly recommend people out there go see this in theaters, even if you haven't seen the first one.
There's a lot of movies that you're just like, yes, you can watch at home. But the experience of seeing a movie isn't just inherently I'm going to go see it I think that's what people started feeling about the movies. Like, I'm just going to sit in a seat and that's it. It's no different. If you watch this movie at home, yeah, you're going to see a movie that you're going to enjoy. But if you couldn't hear the characters, you're going to rewind, you're going to turn it up. You just kind of take away what the intensity of the movie's trying to do. They're making it difficult for you to hear the characters on purpose. You're not like, what are they saying? No, that's the point, right? Like, yeah, and I just feel like watching a movie like this at home will take away that just nonstop intensity you're feeling, like you said. And there's so many movies that depend on that really, whether it's the score or just the way lines are being delivered, are meant to be delivered in that sense. So yeah, watch this movie in the theaters, absolutely with you. I'll probably watch it again. It's weird. I probably said I would rewatch the first one. I actually haven't watched the first one. Not in a bad way. I love it. It's funny enough that I haven't purposely put myself out there to watch that one.
And I love the first one. I would, just like you, I was kind of considering rewatching it before we went to go see this, especially because you and I had a discussion through text after we got out of this movie where we didn't quite remember how the first one ended. I was like, I thought this happened, but I think we were wrong. So I think I'm actually more apt to go back and rewatch the first one than this one. Not because I like it necessarily a ton better, but it's been so long since I've seen it.
I think these movies, that's what makes them good though on their own. Like, they don't require multiple viewings in the sense of what you're enjoying out of them. They're very to the point. They're very specific. They're telling the story they want to tell, and they do it in such a good way that, do I need to see it a second time? No, but if it's on, then that's a great movie to enjoy. You won't get sick of it either.
And a big part of my recommendation too, aside from this just being a blast to go see in theaters, that runtime, man. God, great work, John Krasinski. Yeah. Hour 37, including the credits. You're in, you're out. It doesn't feel rushed. It's paced well. I mean, there's really no scene. Like, I use this app called Run Pee that tells you when to go pee during movies. And it told me straight up for this movie, it's like, dude, we got 2 times for you, but this thing is so tight in terms of runtime. Like, there's really not a lot of fluff in here.
I'll tell you, this didn't feel like an hour and a half. They got so much in there.
Yeah.
I thought for a second, literally when the movie ended, that I was like, was the runtime off? Did I see the wrong runtime? This was an hour and a half. We saw Spiral 2 weeks ago, which was about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Completely, different feel in terms of how long the movie was. I thought Spiral felt so short for a lot of other reasons. But it's so funny how a movie can have the same runtime, but completely different effect on you. And John Krasinski, this whole crew put so much into that movie where there was no downtime.
There's no wasted scenes. Like, there's never a scene where someone's talking. Even though we were talking about the whole narrative with the guys on the docks, it's kind of crazy. We feel like there's even the smallest piece of superfluous narrative in there.
That reminded me. Yeah, well, because it could have been taken out, but it also didn't hinder the movie either. It just kind of felt strange to me. But I wonder if in another cut of the movie,
Yeah.
that there was more story with these feral humans,
Especially
because
based
of
on
like
the synopsis.
exactly. So they might have written that synopsis 3 months ago, 2 months ago, and then with the delay, or actually, sorry, like a year and 3 months ago, and with the delay, and they cut it. Maybe I think that's another thing movies are realizing. Make the movie shorter. You are more likely to get people to come to the movies.
Yeah.
If you're going to watch a 3-hour movie, I'm going to sit on my couch and watch that and pause it and go to the bathroom.
And speaking of that, I'm just speculating here, maybe they did edit a few more things out of it with that storyline. James Gunn, the writer-director of the first two Guardians of the Galaxies, had a quote I loved one time. He goes, "A director's never finished with their movie. The studio just tells them that they need to stop working on it." He's like, "I could still be editing like Guardians of the Galaxy if Marvel didn't demand, like, no, actually it has to play in theaters."
And they'll probably and just like any other craftsman, the way they feel today might be different the next day. Like now they have a different feeling. Maybe they didn't like a scene anymore, and their emotions change, right? Like there's so much into it. So yeah, the runtime fantastic. Usually when I see a short movie or a runtime like that, I get nervous because I'm like, how much realism is like? But this movie did a great job of it.
And one last thing, coming back to, Scoot McNairy being cast as the Marine guy, you get a guy like that who's a pretty strong, I don't even want to say he's a character actor, he's just a pretty good actor. Maybe he did have a larger role, right, to bring someone like that in, because it seems odd to bring him in and he just grunts once and then he's kind of killed.
But what a grunt, though.
The Academy Award nomination for Grunt of the Year, if he's not nominated, I'm going to be pissed.
The Oscars have already pissed me off so much, This is the one way to win me back.
Don't take away Grunt of the Year from us, Jesus. All right, Cycly, before we let the people go, any last thoughts on A Quiet Place Part 2?
No, that was great. And go put yourself in a movie theater, get out there, go and enjoy normalcy, and this is a perfect time to be reintroduced to movies.
I saw it on IMAX. I was very glad I did. The sound was incredible. The visuals were awesome. But I didn't realize this. The theater I go to, their IMAX does not have the reclining seats, which...
Well, that's just...
It's a problem.
And did you talk to the manager after? I'm sorry. Movie was great.
He's like, the fuck do you want me to do? Replace 800 seats? Like, well,
yes.
You mentioned it, not me.
Who put this in the plan, actually? Who thought that was a good idea?
All right, for our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, I'm the mayor, Jeff Hornacek, and we are the Bro Force Squad podcast. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Follow us on Twitter at Bro Force Squad. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify if you type in Bro Force Squad as 3 separate words. Check out everything we post on our website, broforcesquad.com. Till next time, we will see you at the movies. But first, we actually have to go see if Millbrook ended up covering in that Little League game. I had him plus 1.5. Did not.
The way they were batting was not looking good.
You call that batting?
If I'm John Krasinski, I'm like, I don't know that kid, dude.
His mom was like, just relax. I'm like, well, he's going to fucking take a called third strike if he just sits up there. Like,
just breathe. No, there's a lot more he should be doing.
That's poor coaching, to be honest.